Hi everyone and welcome to another garden video. Today we're going to Georgina Yates' garden over near Sheffield. I've known Georgina for years now over on Instagram. It was great to finally see around the garden. Georgina used to work in retail before, after the birth of her daughter, moving into the world of horticulture. She's now a professional gardener working at Brodsworth amongst other English heritage sites, and at home she's got a beautiful jungle garden. But what makes this garden really inspiring? Yes, she's got loads of rare and exciting ferns. They really are her obsession. But it's how she's created such a beautiful, tranquil oasis without spending a huge amount of money and without having to wrap up a lot of plants over winter. So this really is a realistic jungle garden. That's not an instant garden. It's not about fantastic results from year one. It's about a creation that's lovingly grown year after the next. But I think it really is beautiful. And I hope there's some ideas and practical tips in here that will help you out with your garden as well. This was going to be my first garden tour of this year, but unfortunately I had to postpone it due to a heavy thunderstorm forecast. And then when I actually visited to film this, it was raining again. So it only makes sense for me to film this intro as it's nearly dark here and actually raining here for the first time in quite a while. But I hope you enjoy the video. A steady walk around the garden, a good chat about some jungle ideas, how you can create a similar look at home without breaking the bank or having to worry about your garden in winter. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get on with it. So, two Georges, double trouble. Let's go on a tour of your jungle garden.
Sorry, my laugh's really loud. I always get into trouble for it.
Well, let's get going. I'm sure we'll hear the laugh a bit more, won't we? Yeah. So, a little amateurish tour of a very beautiful garden.
I'll let you go first.
I'll push through. So, you definitely have to push through this garden, don't you? There's leaves everywhere, but
that's the intention though, so that you feel immersed in it. Yeah.
I love this beautiful little area here. The seating arrangement, the lovely shade-loving plants over there. Yeah. Ferns are one of your favourite groups of plants, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I grew up around ferns, so my dad was in the forces and we spent a lot of time in Dorset and Germany and lived next to the woods. So yeah, this is just kind of like a flashback to my childhood, really, more than anything. I like the way that they sort of can surround an area and make that area feel very secluded in its own little right. So in this area here, this is where I've been able to kind of like use a little bit of ground cover as well, so that when you sat here, you're totally immersed in this feeling. And just in here, we've got things like Gymnocarpion Dryopteris, which is British native, and it's known as the oak fern. And that over time is covering the whole sort of area as ground cover. So you've got not only your Wallichianae here, but then you've got underplanted with another fern, so that you don't see those bare patches of soil that George talked about. And then I've got Victorianii, I think it is here.
Is that the Dray Stagger?
Yeah, that's a really nice fern. I think it was Alchemy Ferns that gave that one to me, actually, to be honest with you. But yeah, this area it got hit quite a bit in the winter actually this year. This is like the bit where it gets really cold. And that's the beauty of being able to use British native plants, which is quite important to get in there, I think, because that means that these are plants that I'm not going to lose.
Yes.
So that's why I've underplanted with British natives, so that I don't lose them, yeah.
They're often adapted not just to the cold, but to thrive in areas with intense root competition, aren't they?
That's right, yeah.
And in a couple of videos, well, in fact, my last one at Mark's garden, he had a problem area, dry shade, and a lot of the recommendations that people helpfully put forward were native ferns, because literally that's the environments they come from, they fit in visually, make your life easier, and go with something like that.
And like even this Asplenium, Asplenium scolopendrum, this was only a little one that I put in, and it's clearly loving life because it's in what would be its natural environment, basically.
I think plants like that,
it just adds a bit more interest.
Oh yeah, you got so much sort of contrast, haven't you? Even though they're all ferns, they look completely different. So if they just look like green to you, get on a deeper dive into ferns, and there's so many beautiful, easy ones that you'll plant them as a small thing. They won't do anything for a couple of years, but then 3, 4, 5 years down the line, you'll look down and think, wow, that really looks special.
I think what fascinates me by them as well is the fact that they were around before the dinosaurs.
Yes.
And you know, and you can immerse yourself in that side of it as well, and you can create so many different looks from them.
Absolutely.
Just by putting them in your garden, and they'll lend themselves to pretty much any kind of environment because they adapt really well as well.
Yeah, visually as well as practically, yeah.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. So here, I mean, we're just a few metres away from your house, but having the parasol, you know, the ferns, like you said, just sort of wrapping around you.
Yeah, definitely.
It really feels so secluded, doesn't it?
Yeah. It makes you feel like you're having a much more kind of like private experience in the garden as well, because I do entertain a lot in the garden.
As we go through the garden, we'll see, you know, your several different sort of seating areas. And what we were just speaking about before we started recording, the way you spoke about a sort of journey through the garden, when you got friends round, you sit in the sun at the far end up there.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you gradually come back down here. Yeah. You've obviously got this lovely table here to, you know, eat your meals at, set out with all your finery.
It's not set out just for George, I can assure you.
You definitely set this out for me.
It's not set out just for George.
This is VIP treatment. But then later in the evening, as the sun sets down a little bit more, you've got this little exotic sort of retreat here. So
absolutely.
When you designed the garden, did you try to have, you know, seating areas? Were they a priority when you actually put the original plan together? Yeah,
it was really important for me to first of all get a feel for the garden and see where the sun hits and things like that, so that I could kind of work out how I wanted to use it more than anything. It was pretty much a blank canvas. It was very overgrown with brambles and knee-high grass and what have you, and obviously roses because it's clay soil. But one of the most important things was to find out where the sun hits at what time of day, so that I could develop certain areas that I could use for certain things, basically. So like an eating area near to the house.
Very practical,
as you said before, like the chill out area when you've done eating, it's just a nice sort of natural flow over to it. To be able to sit there and just have a glass of wine or whatever with your friends.
Certainly. And I think for people who are watching this video, who might have seen my other videos, it's very similar to the 50 Shades of Green garden in terms of being a roughly north-facing garden, clay soil, a very high water table, very roughly here, about 10 metres by about 20 metres, we'll say, something like that. But you've definitely made the most of the space and using, if I can say this without offending you, quite staple, basic, tropical style exotic plants, very tough and hardy. You're not really pushing the boundaries here of what you can grow, aren't you? But that's very
No, but there's a
reason
for that, though, because obviously I work full-time, I'm a gardener full-time, and I don't have time necessarily to come home and wrap plants up in winter and things like that. And so basically anything that's in my garden has earned its place because, you know, it's survived a winter, because I do not have time to spend hours a day like chopping things back, wrapping it up. So I very much needed things that would survive. And as I said before, I've got like frost pockets in the garden. And so it is very much a case of it's things that give you that sort of rainforest type tropical feel, but like you say, without it being anything totally unusual.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think for me personally, at a stage of my life where I've obviously got my job, YouTube, a child as well now, it's finding those plants that don't need that sort of constant care and attention all the way through the season that are now the plants I'm actually leaning onto a lot more. And your garden, you essentially said to me, it's not a show garden, it's very much a work in progress. It's something that you've done on a budget, using a lot of the plants that people like myself have spoken about in the videos, you know, the basic, real easy starter tropical plants, but this is what they look like after 10 to 15 years in the ground, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be fair, as I said before, it was a blank canvas, and everything that's in the garden started out life really relatively small. So for example, the larger gunnera, that was a bargain by I think it was like £2.50 or something like that, and I dug the most enormous hole for it, and my neighbours thought I'd gone absolutely crazy. But these were things that I were putting in that I knew over time would reach certain sizes, and that I would then get those rewards from it, because I couldn't afford to go out and give myself an instant garden. But as a gardener, that's not what I wanted anyway.
No.
I wanted something that was going to be something that I developed over time, because you reap the rewards from it, and that's where you get the pleasure from. And as for the plants themselves, it's not necessarily about having, you know, really unusual tropical plants, because as you know, my love of plants is ferns. That's what I tend to specialise in.
Yeah, anyone who saw your Gardener's World section,
exactly.
It was all about the ferns, wasn't it?
So the garden is really, it's more about the ferns. The bigger things are what have created the privacy for me.
Absolutely.
You know, and yeah, there are some box standard ferns that will give you that underbelly, as I always call it. But it is more about the ferns, and it's also about the green as well, because I need the calm.
Yeah.
Not only from when I come home from work, but also, you know, with mental issues and things like that.
Calming,
you need that calm. Yeah,
and
definitely.
For me, obviously, the 50 Shades garden I went to, your garden has the same sort of calming, you know, we'll say ambiance, should we, to really jazz things up. Well, atmosphere is probably the more basic word I'm looking for. But it's the way that you've got tall plants that, you know, hang over your top of your head. You've got those big leaves. You've got all the beautiful sort of shades of green in the ferns. It is a really sort of relaxing atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, very much
Absolutely beautiful.
And that was paramount for me because, as I say, I work full time. So, and I started off by studying, then worked full time. And it was important for me to be able to come home and just feel like I was just lost in my own private little world.
I get that, yeah.
And as you said before, you know, things have been done on a budget. I couldn't afford to take my daughter on holiday. No. So the whole point was to also create an area where I felt like I was on holiday. A
real escape from,
absolutely.
From everyday
escape
life.
From the pressures of life, basically.
No, I understand that definitely. And for me, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to your garden, obviously I followed you on Instagram for quite a few years now. We'll say, we don't even know how many years it was, but a lot of years. You're relatively local to me, so you're near Sheffield.
Yeah.
But it was more that your garden, it's where you've created this feeling of sort of tranquility, seclusion, using the plants I talked about as, in theory, these are nice, easy plants to start a garden, but you've actually done it. You've done things like having the taller plants around the edges, haven't you, to create that sort of boundary. Yeah. And I think it really sort of creates a whole different feel to just having rows of smaller plants, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I said this to you before as well, like when we've chatted in the past.
Yeah.
That, it's really important to experiment with your plants, and it's important to have different heights because they add your structure and your depth. But don't be afraid to put some of the bigger things nearer to the front of the borders, because in the wild, that's how these things would grow. They basically come up wherever it suits them at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So, you know, it's quite important to just play around a little bit and have stuff where you wouldn't ordinarily feel comfortable putting it. And it's quite surprising what you can create by doing that, because you end up creating a much more natural environment.
Very true, yes.
You know, I've got plants in here that shouldn't even be in this country.
No, well, we all have.
Because, indeed, but because we've planted them in the ways that we have, they sit really nicely and look like they belong here.
They do.
And that's the whole point of it.
So sort of like repeating the chord lines. I mean, a group of three there, is that intentional, or is that just...
Yeah, well, actually, interestingly,
did one die back?
This one here, which is now turning out to be the biggest, my sister lives down in Folkestone, and some years ago she sent me some packets of seeds. And I remember I used to have a little round table, and I stood out in the garden just sowing all these seeds. I had no idea what any of them were, because it was a really long time ago. And I just planted that in the ground because it took. And it turned into, for many, many years, what looked like a lump of grass. And I kept thinking, why did she ever even send that to me? And then a few years back, all of a sudden, it just shot up. And I thought, oh my God, it's a cordyline. And it literally just kind of almost, I know that sounds crazy, but happened overnight.
Oh, no, yeah,
and it's ended up being the bigger one of all of them, because I'd put them in and not realised that that's what that was.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that one came from seed and it's now the biggest.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I love the sort of blender plants, and like you say, having tall plants at the front instantly creates that sort of, like this Miscanthus here. It's like you're in a jungle, isn't it? You're pushing past it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even like this fern is huge, and probably one of my faults, my early videos, is talking about plants like ferns is purely like companion plants, but that fern there is probably getting on for 1.5 meters tall now.
Yeah, I kind of judge that. I know I'm shrinking every year, but every time
I wasn't going to comment.
Every time I walk past it in the spring and it starts coming up, I judge it by how tall it's getting against me. But I'm not sure that quite works right. But
it's obviously thriving in this climate.
Yeah, it loves it. And I do believe that this is a hybrid between the Dryopteris affinis and Dryopteris filix mass as well. And I think it's just, in all honesty, I'm not sure I planted that there. I think it's found its way there. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So,
and then with things like the Miscanthus, the other thing I like to do is I like to put things like that in front of it. Although, to be fair, this has not done very well this year. But
flowering plants haven't done well for either this year, have they?
No, I know. It's a bit of a shame, but you know, that's the price you pay for planting things that don't belong in this country. Yeah. But the idea with this is that when they do really well and they start to flower, it almost looks like you've got fairy lights running through the Miscanthus.
Yeah, no, I can see
and
that.
And I love doing stuff like that.
That's lovely.
Giant scabious is a really good one as well to put in front of Miscanthus, because again, that gets the little lemon-coloured flowers on it, and that looks amazing as well. And they just look like you've dressed your Miscanthus with fairy lights.
So you're sort of creating a more sort of layered planting, but you're also covering up some of the sort of brown foliage lower down. And there is actually one sort of practical tip which I hadn't even thought about or considered.
There is an explanation between the dead stems, so please don't think that I'm just a lazy gardener. What I do is I alternate the years in which I chop down my Miscanthus to ground level, and the same with my Arundodonax as well. And the reason why I do that is I get really bad winds whipping through this garden. So every other year I will chop the grasses down, but then the following year I leave it for a year at different heights through the grass, so that it actually acts as almost like a structure to hold it upright in the heavy winds.
It certainly works, doesn't it? Just having that extra foliage there. You can tell it's supported. You can't tell at this time of year, can you? You can barely see them unless you're looking for them.
When I first planted these, I spent a lot of time each year, every time we'd had bad storms or whatever, coming in the garden and cutting stuff back that had gone over. And I have found that since I've started doing this, it takes a lot less work trying to keep it looking tidy.
So there we go.
So
a nice practical tip. If you've got an exposed garden and you want to get away with being a lazy gardener, definitely just leave the growth in. There we go.
The other thing I've also found as well, that by doing the alternate years, is Miscanthus giganteus doesn't tend to flower very much in this country.
No, it doesn't get tall enough. Oh, right.
It does flower, yeah.
Oh, that's
and I think that's because I'm leaving it alternate years, so I do get flowers from mine.
Oh, that is interesting, that. Yeah,
and it looks pretty cool when it flowers as well, because you get these lovely, like, you know, bits coming out from the top, and it looks fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Learn something new every day, don't you? Definitely. Oh, who's this I'm nearly walking into?
I told you he wouldn't know you were there.
Oh, no. Hello. What's his name then?
Oh, God, I knew you'd do this to me. So the dog is called Great Googly Moogly. And the story is that when we decided we were going to get a dog, I wanted to call him Elvis, but my daughter didn't. So we started making a list and we were going to compromise. And she used to watch a programme on TV called Maggie and the Ferocious Beast. And the ferocious beast used to say Great Googly Moogly.
Oh,
and one day at 3 years old, she toddled into the kitchen and said to me, I know what we'll call him, Mummy, and just went, Great Googly Moogly. And I could not say no.
Oh, obviously.
So that's where he got his name from. And he's like 15 years old now, and he's going blind and he's going deaf. And I fall over him quite regularly, as the guys from work will know.
So you've tried to make his life easier by creating this sort of jungle garden.
Yes, indeed.
He can't find his way around. Yeah. No, it's lovely. I do enjoy it.
And there's clothes props as well, by the way, for the washing line.
I've already said, this isn't a show garden. And no, to me, that's part of why I wanted to come, because you're like myself, you're on a garden journey, you're doing things on a budget, you're not afraid to do one project at a time, and you've already got projects planned for your retirement, haven't you?
I absolutely have, yes.
But in the meantime, plants like the Tetrapanax, they're in the ground, they're growing away, they look fantastic, don't they? So I think really having a jungle garden, you can have the fast results if you want them, can't you? With plants like the bananas here.
Yeah.
But the Trachycarpus, you said you bought a lot of those while they were small.
I did,
look at them now.
Yes, that one actually was about £10, I think it cost. One of my friends bought me that when I had an operation about 12 years ago. And I was saying to George earlier that they literally do double in size in about 10 years' time, basically. So that was quite small, that one, when it first went in. But I've always got in my mind of how it's going to look long term, because that's what I'm aiming to do. I don't want to go out and have an instant garden. It's important to me to watch it grow, because that's part of what I'm about.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do understand that. And
Yeah.
my gardens are very much a mixture of some areas that are more instant impact. You know, I had the big plants. That was the whole sort of, you know, the thing I was looking forward to creating
Yeah.
with you. Other parts are very much like yourself. I want to see this develop into something
Yeah.
that, you know, I want to get a canopy. I want to get the different levels of planting in there. And
I mean, don't get
it's such
me
a
wrong.
beautiful style of gardening.
It's nice to be able to go out and buy yourself a nice, you know, specimen plant from time to time.
Yeah.
And there's been times where I've done that, but most of my plants have started off life really small.
Yeah.
And it's because I've been, like you said before, I've worked on a budget at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah,
and
a
I'm on
budget,
my
yeah.
own, so I've had to kind of like prioritise things and do them as and when I've been able to do them. So,
Absolutely. As
yeah.
most people who watch this video probably know about themselves, really.
Yeah. Oh, you just nearly tripped over him
Nearly,
again.
nearly.
I told you, didn't I?
Yeah. I don't know. I'll be careful. I'll be careful. So to me, I know in videos, well, the people that watch my videos, there's probably a proper mixture of real obsessed plants people who maybe have a little bit more budget and want to get the garden just looking right.
Yeah.
And I know there's people who has to be more frugal with the money they spend on the plants. And I think your garden is a fantastic example. Plants like ferns, just how much impact you can get for a couple of quid. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what are some of your favourites in this area
So
here?
they don't necessarily need to be expensive. I mean,
No.
I've always said, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, that I have what I call my underbelly planting,
Yes.
which is your general sort of Filix mass or, you know, Filix feminea. But then I will put in a nice specimen
A wild
fern
fern.
like the Dryopteris wallichianae. And
Yeah.
then next to it, I've got a charter, which I do believe has been recategorised to, I think it's Cicadia.
I'll take your word for that as a
yeah.
fern expert.
I know that not everybody can see the difference with ferns, but I can. It's important for me to show things off the way that I have done because that's what brings me pleasure.
So Dryopteris wallichiana, for
Yeah.
a fern that costs maybe 15 to 20 pounds, you're getting something that is literally like a tree fern on the ground. Massive fronds, aren't they? Huge
Yeah, they
things.
are. They're really big. And each year it's getting bigger and bigger. With that one in particular, what I like about that is how it comes up in the spring because it
Yeah.
has those black fronds.
Really dark,
and
aren't they? Very
look
striking.
incredible when they come up in spring. And that again is part of the beauty of it because it's about nurturing and watching things grow. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm definitely not. I don't want an instant garden. It would never have been quite what I'd have been looking for anyway.
No.
Each to their own, though. You know,
Oh,
people's lifestyles have changed so much nowadays
Very
that
true.
you need that sometimes because you don't have time to do it yourself. But for me, yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
yeah.
I couldn't say that. It's all a journey, and plants like ferns, they're not just about the summer look now. You get that spring interest,
Yeah.
you know, the beautiful sort of vibrancy. It's something to look forward to. But your garden, as we show people
Which you're
more on
being
this,
attacked by.
which I am being attacked by this for me, yeah. It really is a sort of summer paradise, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
it is, absolutely.
you've got somewhere to enjoy when you come home from work. You've been out gardening for 12 hours in the summer rain and snow that we tend to get here.
Yeah.
You come back home and you want somewhere to relax in the sun. And I
Yeah,
think
I
this is
do,
such
yeah.
a lovely area. I mean, it's just such a eclectic mixture of plants. You've got the agave americana, haven't you,
Yeah.
over there? A lovely little pond over there. So what's that?
So there's a story behind the agave and the pond with the two pots as well. So I did want a pond because
Yeah.
I wanted to bring a bit more wildlife into the garden.
Yes.
But I wasn't in a position to put a big pond in or anything like that. And so this planter is one of the old brutalist planters that you would have got from the
yeah.
council
I can
years
picture
ago.
that with some geraniums or pelargoniums.
Yeah,
in it.
and I picked that up off Facebook Marketplace for about £25 from Morecambe Bay, which is also how I got friendly with a guy up there that's got an antique shop as well. Yeah,
I was trying
the
to
sun
catch-
is really trying hard
that
to
2
come out.
minutes of summer sun, but we missed it now, haven't we?
And I literally, with that, I had the idea and I put a Prosecco cork in it and plumber's putty and created a little wildlife area with a pond.
Nice,
And
fantastic.
then the agave, this was a present from some of my friends at college.
Yeah.
And the guy that used to help the tutor out at college used
Yeah.
to keep this under the bench in the glass house.
Oh, wow.
And they bought it off him for me for my birthday. And then I came across this fantastic brutalist planter
Yeah.
that is
That's
actually
lovely.
on legs, which is quite unusual.
Yeah.
And again, I think I paid about £25 for that one. off Facebook Marketplace, not that I'm plugging them.
That's the place to go for
bargains,
isn't it?
And I just thought it was the perfect little home for it, because it doesn't fit in the ground, in the planting in my garden, because the logistics of the garden are all wrong for it, but it does do, you know, quite all right in that planter.
No, I think that's fantastic. So you can grow
it's
plants.
Called Melvin.
Called Melvin?
It's called Melvin because that's what his name was that owned it.
Oh, right, okay. I was ready for another funny story.
So we call it Melvin.
Yeah. Oh, well, Melvin the agave, yeah. No, fantastic. I do love that sort of, I think the sort of,
there you go.
There we go, bit of sun. I'll try not to obscure it, but look at that majestic fountain there. Brodsworth's got nothing in your garden, has it? It's fantastic. I do think the sort of, we'll say brutalist, the concrete, you know, real stark architecture, it just works so well with jungle plants, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, absolutely.
Have you seen that Las Posas place in Mexico? I think it's Mexico. I'll put it on the screen, but
I don't know if I've seen it.
It's basically like a surreal dream world in the jungle where it's huge, great big concrete sculptures, but with all these, you know, amazing tropical style jungle plants taking over, it just looks incredible. And you've definitely got that sort of vibe on a small level, haven't you?
Yeah, without a doubt.
When you got oh, there we go again. We're getting summer today. So.
And I've got water lilies in there. I've got pygmy nymphea, but unfortunately the flower's just gone over. I've had about 6 flowers out of this year. There's one coming up somewhere in here as well. So, you know, you can bring a little bit more colour into the garden just through what you're putting in a little pond. And ponds don't have to be enormous, but they will bring the wildlife into the garden.
Oh yeah.
I've got a massive fear of frogs, by the way.
A fear of frogs?
Don't tell anyone.
No. I was
on the phone a few nights ago to my best friend and could hear a frog croaking next to the pond.
Oh dear.
So I'm slightly concerned that I might actually have frogs in it now.
Well.
But that's another story.
If we see any on the way around, I won't tell you. So, I love, obviously my channel mainly focuses on jungle, tropical, exotic gardens, but to me it's any garden with an exciting twist that happens to use those kind of plants mainly. But I love the sort of stumpery area there, and those berries just look so amazing, don't they?
So I've actually got, there's probably about 7 or 8 different stumps in here, and over the years there's stories to each and every one of them. Me and my friend have been out in the car and come across them on the side of the road and all sorts.
Yeah, been there, yeah.
And I really wanted to create a little stumpery area because obviously ferns are my passion. And this little bit of the garden here stays quite shaded. So I've got cyclamen in here and hellebores and things like that, because these will come up nicely against the tree stumps as well. And it's another sort of architectural bit of planting that you can use. It doesn't just have to be about plants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, something that, you know, interests me personally in the sort of videos that I've done this year and last year is when people combine the sort of exotic plants like Factory Japonica with a different style. So you're a professional gardener, you work in environments where, you know, there is like a fernery, a shady area. Juggling the two things together, it just creates a look that's definitely sort of your personality, what you want to grow, isn't it? I think that's really exciting. So, I mean, looking around, there's obviously the plants like Musa Baju there, fantastic, great big specimen, the big Trachycarpus, but it's when it comes to the sort of companion plants, that's where you can put your stamp in the garden, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't really have a massive amount of colour down the bottom end of the garden, but as we've mentioned already, that's mainly due to like the logistics of the garden, and I don't get a massive amount of sun down there. So I tend to, if I am going to have any colour, I'll tend to put, you know, the colour more up this end because this is where I get the sun.
Yeah.
And so this is where I'm kind of playing a little bit at the moment, because I'm a foliage person, I'm not really a flower person, but I get hay fever as a gardener like you do. So I'm just playing a little bit with this, and like I said to you before as well, this will be something that I will invest more time and money into when I come to retire, because I will have the time to do that.
No, I like that. And I think so many times, you know, in gardening media, you see a garden, it's like, this is a showcase, this is, you know, finished, to use a word that no one likes.
I don't think a garden should ever be finished.
It shouldn't be, but for lots of people it can be, can't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's when they show something that's like an end result or a transformation, you miss out on that real life journey. And like, I mean, like around here, I know there's beautiful areas of bare soil there ready for your planting when you retire, but it's sort of, there's no rush to get everything finished, is there? And
no, not at all.
It's perfectly normal if you're a normal person with a busy life, with a, you know, long hours at work, you know, a very sort of managed budget spending it, to have projects that lead from 1 year to the next, to have 3-year projects, 5-year projects. Yeah. I'm there myself, but growing this style of planting, you definitely get the feel of that sort of jungle environment, and you get the fast growth, don't you, until those other plants come to fruition.
But also, I think if I'd have been able to create an instant garden, which I couldn't because I was doing it on a budget, I wouldn't have got that enjoyment out of it.
No, I'm the same
because
myself.
the enjoyment for me is seeing things grow, but also I love nothing more than sitting in the garden with a cup of tea and looking at something and thinking, I know what I'll do there.
Yes.
And that's what brings me the pleasure. And it's like in here, I've recently planted some Machusia, the ostrich fern.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact, because what I'm probably going to do is bring that border out more to the left over time. And I know for a fact that that will spread through this border eventually, because this gets really damp. And so there might be a bit of bare soil at the moment, but given time, I know it's going to fill up.
Absolutely. So patience is obviously a virtue, and
definitely.
not a particularly common one, but plants like that spread, that just gradually sort of do the thing.
Yeah.
Obviously great from a budget point of view, great that it'll just do it by itself and doesn't need any kind of care. But to me, once you've got that look of really simplified planting, so we've got a phormium there, is that yellow wave or something, maybe a little bit larger?
Something or other. It was one that actually we did a project at college when I was studying at college.
Yeah.
And it was at the front of the college, and the tutor wanted us to lift it and divide it.
Right, okay.
Because we were learning, I think we were learning about division at the time.
Yeah.
And I think most of us took a piece of it away, and that's just basically kind of how it's ended up, really.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a lovely phormium. So just a sort of simple sort of design. So big trachycarpus there, you've got your height, you've got your canopy. Obviously now you have after 15 years, but having the phormium there, and then just the ferns as a sort of monopoly of ferns across here, I just think it looks, it's just so simple, but it'll be so beautiful once you get more of those sort of lovely ostrich ferns.
And obviously they'll grow up in height, they'll sort of reach around about 90 centimetres a metre almost when they're at the best. And then the idea is that will then hide the harshness of the jacuzzi as well. But also what it'll do is it'll make you, when you are using the jacuzzi, feel like you're in your own little private space, and you're lost in it.
It'll be cool. And talking about private spaces, you've got a plan for through here, haven't you? Which I thought was especially cool.
I have got a plan for in there, yeah.
So if I push through the phormium here, and the
you might get attacked by the clothesline like that.
So in here, this secluded little dell.
So this little area here, as you can tell, probably, I'm guessing, doesn't get a massive amount of sunlight. So once these tetrapanax have grown up a little bit more, these were actually suckers, by the way, from the main one that's behind you.
Yes.
Once these have grown up a little bit more, which will not take very long because they are quite fast growing, I'm going to install an outdoor shower in this part of the garden.
Wow. I think that'll be very cool, that.
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier, it'll be done on a budget as well, because it'll just be a case of either using a solar outdoor shower and just getting some sort of like bamboo screening or something from somewhere, or it'll be one that I connect up through the hose pipe. It won't be something that I have plumbed in, because that expense would just be too much to me.
And also you then have, pipe work running through the garden, wouldn't you, that needs protecting in winter and that kind of thing. So I like the idea of, like you mentioned, as I try to push back out again, putting a hot tap on as like an outdoor tap, running the hose up. And also I think I prefer the reliability of something that you can connect to the hot, rather than relying on solar, because here in the UK
I'm not going to get enough sun.
No.
And the other thing is as well is that the plants that are here, because that's one of the reasons why I want to put it here, they will benefit from the water.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So it will be being reused within the garden, so to speak. So you've got the Arundodonax and obviously the Gunnera, and they love the water. So, and you can't give them enough.
No.
So if you're having a little shower here from time to time, you're watering the plants effectively at the same time. So
you can have your 2-hour hot shower, bit of music on, enjoy it.
Maybe not quite a 2 hours, but
completely guilt-free, can't you? No, it's fantastic. So, I mean, I suppose as someone who, has explored your own garden journey so far and works as a gardener, have you got any tips for people wanting to create a jungle garden, a tropical garden on a budget? Where would you sort of start?
Yeah, I mean,
put you on the spot now.
No, just don't be afraid to buy things small, because the beauty of what we call jungle plants is that the vast majority of them are big foliage.
Yes.
And even though they might not look that initially, they will get that way over a period of time. And in all honesty, it does not take that long for that to happen.
No, no.
I mean, I moved in, what will it be now, 18, almost 19 years ago. I didn't start the garden straight away. I think I'd been in for about a year before I started doing anything with the garden, because I was concentrating on the house. And what I did is I had an idea of what I wanted to create. So I'd got a vision of how I kind of wanted it to look. And then I started at the bit that was nearest to the house, and bit by bit, I've worked my way up to the top of the garden.
Yes.
To the point where I'm now ready to kind of go back down to the bottom of the garden.
With the sort of next stage.
Not necessarily start again, but do the next stage of it.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Because obviously I mentioned to you, one of the things that I really want to do down there is put an outdoor kitchen in.
That'll look amazing.
And that would look fantastic. And what I want to be able to do is have like a freestanding pergola with it underneath it, but so that you still see all of the planting. So again, you feel like you're cocooned by the plants. So you technically feel like you're in a rainforest or a jungle on holiday.
So something like this one here with using the black paint.
Absolutely.
It's sort of, I mean, it couldn't be any bolder, but equally it just sits so well, doesn't it? And I'm a big fan of, I know things go in and out of style, but having that real dark grey or black colour in, it just looks so contemporary. So it just fits in so well with these big green leaves, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you know, there's a couple of things that can be said for using like something like the black paint.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really like is that you see the structure, but also it makes the plants pop against it as
really
well,
does,
which is really cool. I don't want to cover it with like loads of climbers or anything, because that's not what I'm about. This area is meant to get the sun on it, because that's why I've got the sun loungers underneath it. But the idea of using the black is that, like you say, it's a little bit more contemporary, and I quite like that mix of modern and old as well. But the thing that it really does do is it shows the plants up against it too.
Absolutely. And even though you've got the sun here, you know, this with the sort of spacing of the slats up here, that's not going to block much sun out at all. But
no, it doesn't.
It still gives you that feeling of when you're actually under it, you're in somewhere. You know, you're protected. I know you're close to obviously the motorway over there, but you feel like you're actually enclosed more, don't you?
It's really interesting that you should say that, because I toyed with the idea of putting a roof on it at one point, but not necessarily a full roof. But actually what I discovered when I did come and sit in here once I'd finished it and kind of dressed it all and sat on the sun loungers is we'd got a night where it was really clear, and you looked up and you could see all the stars and everything. But like you say, you still felt it gave the garden another dimension, because it felt like you were sat inside a different room, but you were experiencing the outside. And I just thought, why would I want to cover that up?
I completely understand that. And again, that's something that, you know, whether you're watching YouTube things or other gardening programs on TV, it's so often the things that you can't describe, you can't plan for, that really make a garden feel magical, aren't they? So like the here, looking up, seeing the stars. Further down there, you talked about the way the sun comes round and just hits the back of the gunnery leaves. And for me, into my photography, it's all about the light. And I'll put a plant somewhere just to catch the evening light. It might not be the best place on paper to put that plant, but I want to grow that plant and it'll look fantastic in the light there. So
I will spend hours sitting in the garden just looking at various different things through the day, because I want to see where the light actually hits it. Because that will help me determine what I want to put where and how I want to use that space as well.
An exciting plant in the wrong place, you just walk past it, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
But when you've got a plant with something about it, just any little detail, it might be the colours on a phormium, it might be the, you know, a basjoo moving in the wind, it might be, you know, the sort of delicate intricacy of a fern. But when you've got the light hitting it at just right angle, it's just magic, isn't it? And that's what it's about, creating the garden. And I think that's really what you've achieved here. And to me, it's using plants that can survive in the north of England, that you don't have to worry about protecting. You don't even protect this basjoo, do you, here?
No, I don't know. I haven't got time to mess around, like putting bales of straw around it or anything like that. So that particular Musa basjoo has been in now since about 2013, I think it is. And because I've done what I've done with the rest of the garden, it's created a microclimate, and also it's sat next to the jacuzzi, so
Yeah.
it gets the warmth from that through the winter as well, and so it helps to protect it a little bit. So I don't wrap it. I don't have time to do anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
And I think without trying to sound too sort of environmental and modern and everything, I know myself, just practically, I don't have the time to look after that many things in my garden. I wouldn't want to plant a huge amount of tender exotics now that rely on being wrapped up every -3 that we see.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing to see a garden where you've actually followed the basics, use the plants that can take the cold, and just leave them to it. And plants like this, like the banana, once it's a decent size anyway, which this clump clearly is, there's so much energy there that even if it is in a really bad winter, cut right back, it's always going to come back.
Yeah.
And you'll still get height like the one up there, which you said gets cut back every year. I think there's a lot to be said for really, focus on a restrained basket or selection of plants to start with, because you know they'll survive. Giving them the space that they need, which is something I often struggle with, and just really focus on the basics. Like you talk about not using colour, I would say you focus on the greens. It's a different way of looking at it, but it really just makes the whole garden sort of sing and really feel cohesive, doesn't it?
I think with the garden I've done very similar to what I've done in the house, in the sense of I've picked specific plants that give you that feel of. And so they give you a tropical, almost like rainforest feel, and then underplanted it with, a belly of like Filix mash, your male fern and things like that. And in the house, I've done similar things where I've bought the odd little expensive piece and then worked around it with other things that haven't cost as much money, and it gives it an overall feel. And that's what I think I've tried to do in the garden as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see that, and I know in theory that's what a lot of people should be doing, but I think your garden is a fantastic example of actually doing that in practice. And you look down there, you see that sort of restricted jungle path that we all talk about, having to push past the leaves, but most of you, it is ferns, isn't it? It's simply ferns and having some greenery above your head straight away. It's a jungle garden, and you don't need to spend thousands of pounds to achieve that in a relatively short time frame.
And of course the beauty with ferns is that you can divide them and spread, as they grow, and spread them through your garden like that as well. You don't have to go out and spend lots and lots of money on plants when all you need to do is maybe a little bit of research on how to propagate them, because you can create more plants from one plant at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely. And other than the Trachycarpus, which obviously you want to know where they're going long term, don't you? It's worth getting a bit of a plan together. Start small with them. They're in the ground, they're growing, while you're saving up, aren't they? They're doing their thing. But then every other plant we talked about pretty much, so the Gunnera, Musabaju, the ferns, the Miscanthus, they can all be split up, cut up, propagated, divided, and it really is so easy. A sharp spade, a bit of determination, and really the guts to go for it.
But that's what you get the pleasure from as well, because you start to realise that you've actually created that. You've done that and created these plants that are going in your garden. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I use plenty of nurseries. I've bought a lot of plants for the garden, but it's definitely been on a budget, and it's definitely been over a period of time. But where there's been plants that I can divide and, move around or sow from seed or whatever, that's absolutely what I've done.
Definitely. And I think as we sort of walk back, I'll show people it from, this other point of view. Are there any particular nurseries or sellers that you recommend for buying a lot of the shadier loving plants and exotics? Yeah,
there's a couple actually. Obviously, I've got my friends that have got Alchemy Ferns up near York.
Ah, right.
They're absolutely incredible, and they have, to be fair to them, they've gifted me a few ferns for the garden as well. But I've got a really nice relationship with those guys.
I have heard them, but I've never popped in actually.
Yeah, they have a lovely collection of ferns, and they work really, really hard as well, and it's just a family business. And so, I think they appreciate support from people as well.
I'm happy to mention these smaller places that really keep our passion alive, don't they? Yeah.
Also, there's a guy called Plants for Shade on the internet that's down south. I think it's Longacre.
Longacre Plants. Yeah, I bought from there before,
He's brilliant because what he actually does is he'll categorise things into specific type of plants for your garden.
Oh, like
so
dry
if you've got
shade.
shade garden, dry
Yes.
shade, wet shade, you know, that kind of thing. He's really good with that. And he has a really lovely collection, again, of ferns, but also other plants as well. I use Markham Grange, which is near to where I work. Those guys have got some really good plants. And Wayne that runs it is definitely a plants man, so he gets a really good collection of plants in. So yeah, so, you know, we've all got our favourite nurseries. There's a few that you've mentioned that I've picked up on you think that me and my friend are down to do some road trips to.
Yeah. Road trips what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But that's the other thing as well, like, you know, share your knowledge with people, because if you're sharing, then, you know, people are learning at the same time. So
absolutely. And just one last thing to mention, obviously you've mentioned you work a few times. Where do you work, and why should fern lovers really go there?
So I work at Brodsworth Hall and Gardens, which is English heritage, and one of the areas that I particularly look after is the fern dell.
Yes.
And it's definitely worth a visit. It's very rare that you see something like that in this country now. So yeah, by all means go and have a visit and check it out, because it's quite beautiful. But it's not just about the ferns. There's a lot goes off at Brodsworth.
And
but yeah,
this is something that I probably don't mention enough. If you just got into gardening, you know, because of a love of these particular plants, you might not think the idea of going to a garden is necessarily your thing. You might not think you're that person.
Yeah.
But go to one of these places. Go for the thing, you know, go for like the jungle garden at Chatsworth, the exotic area. Go for the fern dell at Brodsworth. And while you're there, you're just taking so much more, don't you, about creating a garden, about creating views, focal points.
Yeah,
you get so many ideas. Just they just sort of seep into you as you walk around. And I've never actually been to Brodsworth yet. That might have to change.
I keep telling you, you've got to come, George.
Well, I'll have to make it across. Even if I can't film there without getting in trouble with English heritage, I think I need to have a visit over.
Yeah,
because
you definitely do.
It's got that sort of crazy. I mean, it's like a huge sunken rockery, isn't it? A quarry, essentially.
Well,
an amphitheatre of ferns.
It was a quarry. The family that lived there originally, they basically quarried the land there because it's magnesium limestone, and that's what the original house was built from, the Georgian house that was there.
There we go.
And then the Victorians, being as clever as they were at recycling, used the areas to create things like the fern dell, which is like a sunken garden.
It's an amazing place. It really is a proper amphitheatre of ferns, and I think, you know, the gardens that I've been to this year, they're all people that want to create something spectacular, something a bit different, and that's something that's been around since or before even the Victorian era, isn't it? And it really is an amazing example, as is your garden here. So thank you very much for this beautiful little tour around today. I've enjoyed
very welcome, George.
It's a lovely mixture of inspirational, practical, and it's really great to see a garden with someone like myself, you know, short on time, often short on money, but you still created something, you know, fantastic in an area where you just wouldn't expect it. So thank you very much for your time. And where can people find you online if they want to see more of your garden and the place you work?
So obviously, if you go on Instagram, I'm under Georgina's Gardening Life.
Yes.
And that's where you will see a collection of photographs of my garden, but also where I work and some of the other gardens where I'm lucky enough to get to visit through English Heritage as well.
Oh, fantastic. And you were actually using the hashtag George's Jungle Garden before someone stepped in and
yes, I was. But I did make a point of letting you know that as well.
You did make a point, yeah, for legal reasons it's out there. So I might well just chop this bit out of the video. But no, it's all good. I've really enjoyed looking around, meeting you today, seeing around the garden, and it really is incredible. Just the feeling, the atmosphere. I don't know every plant in your garden, but I know most of the plants, but the way you've combined them, the areas you've created, the overall feeling, I can see why you get so much from it. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
We'll see everyone in the next video. See you later.